Hare Krishna. Welcome to this morning Srimad Bhagavatam class on the 18th of June. We'll offer some prayers. Om Ajnanatimiraandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Mancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayet Sushrushoshadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syanmahatsevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanat Shrinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridyantasto Bhadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Tadarajastamo Bhava Kamalobhadayascha ye Cheta ete rana viddam Stitam Sattve Prasidati Evam prasanna manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam Mukta Sangasya Jayate Vidyate Hridaya Grantis Chidyante Sarva Samshayaha Shiyante Chasya Karmani Drishta Evatmanishware Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Hare Krishna. So we are continuing with the second canto of Bhagavatam. We are in the 6th chapter and today's verse is 2-6-20. So chapter 6 is Purusha Sukta confirmed. So just to get a context to where we are at, the story inside the story inside the story. So Suta Goswami's questions about Maharaj Parikshit, and then it went into Vidura's question to Maitreya, and his questions about Maharaj Parikshit or in just creation. And after that, Maharaj Parikshit's question about creation to Shukadeva Goswami. And then Shukadeva Goswami now narrates a conversation between Lord Brahma and Narada Muni. That's where we are. And Lord Brahma and Narada Muni also speak about the creation aspect. The questions asked by Narada Muni were covered in the previous chapter, in the 5th chapter. So Narada Muni actually asked to Lord Brahma that I have 6 questions I want to ask. I want to know what are the characteristics of this universe. Yad Rupam. What is this universe? What are the characteristics of the universe? And then he asks, what are the components or ingredients of the universe? That is Yacha. What are the ingredients of this universe? And then he asks, what is the shelter, Adhishtanam? What is the shelter for this universe? And also, what does it depend on? Yeah, Param. What does it depend on? And then he asks, yeah, Yata Shrishtam, how is it created? And then Yata Samstam, how is it preserved? So broadly, there are 3 categories of questions in the 6 questions for our own understanding. If we see, there is characteristics of the universe and what is it composed of? What are the ingredients, right? And then the next question is, what is the shelter of this universe and what does it depend on? There is second set of questions. It's not in this order, but just for our clarity. And then the next 2 questions are, how is it created? How is it preserved? So these are the 6 questions that Narada Muni asks. And other than this, he also raises his doubts about, I thought, or I think that you are the supreme independent Lord. From you, everything comes. So he's speaking to Lord Brahma. And then he says that you're self-sufficient. And I don't know of any other cause for the creation. So, but however, I do observe that you do so much austerity and so much penance and meditation. So can you please clarify, is there somebody powerful than you? So these are all the doubts and questions that Narada Muni raises. Narada Muni raises to Lord Brahma. And then once he asks these questions, Lord Brahma first chooses to remove the misconceptions of Narada Muni that Lord Brahma himself is the supreme creator. He says, no, there is someone above me. And then he starts answering all the questions. Now, we are in the part of the answer, which is, what is this creation composed of, or what are the ingredients? So the 6th chapter that we are discussing right now, verse number 1 through 17 are, mainly focusing on the answers for like what are the ingredients of the material universe, this, so then Lord Brahma explains, as we read and heard, about how Garbhodakashaya Vishnu's limbs, or the universal form, actually provides the ingredients for the construction and construction of the universe, or the everything that's in the universe is coming from the ingredients from Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, who's also here Virat Rupa. Okay, so now 18 to 22, Lord Brahma takes a little slight like a contrast, right? He's taking a little contrast here, explaining about Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. Of course, he creates all this, the universe here. He provides the ingredients for the universe here, but at the same time, he is not limited to here. There's another world, the spiritual world, and so he speaks about the spiritual world compared to material world in these verses 18 onwards, 4 verses. So so that's where we are at. We heard over the last couple of days about how the Lord is in the spiritual world, and also is a provider, or provider of ingredients for this material world. So he is there as well as here. And then yesterday's verse was about how the spiritual world is 3/4 of the energy, and material world is just 1/4 of the Krishna's energy or the Lord's energy. So yesterday's verse also we heard that who belong to spiritual world, who are in the spiritual world. The spiritual world citizens are characterized by deathlessness, amritam, and then happiness and fearlessness. This they have these characteristics. Whoever is in the spiritual world have these characteristics. Now in this verse a little bit contrast will be given of who lives in this world, who, again, emphasizing on who lives in spiritual world and who lives in material world. That's where we are at. So now we will read the verse. Text 20. Sorry for the interruption with my throat. Okay. Padastrayo bahischasan aprajanam ya ashramah antastrilokyastvaparo grihamedo brihadvrataha. One more time. Padastrayo bahischasan aprajanam ya ashramah antastrilokyastvaparo grihamedo brihadvrataha. Padastrayo bahischasan aprajanam ya ashrama antastrilokyastvaparo grihamedo brihadvrataha. So synonyms here. Word to word translation. Padaha trayaha. The cosmos of 3/4 of Lord's energy. Bahihi. Thus situated beyond. Cha, and for all. Asan were prajanam, of those who are not meant for rebirth. Ye, those. Ashramaha, status of life. Antaha, within. Trilokya, of these 3 worlds. 2, but. Aparaha, others. Grihamedaha, attached to family life. Abrihad vrataha, without strictly following a vow of celibacy. The translation. The spiritual world, which consists of 3/4 of Lord's energy, is situated beyond this material world, and it is especially meant for those who will never be reborn. Others who are situated to family life and who do not strictly follow celibacy vows must live within the 3 material worlds. We'll go back to the verse again. Padastrayo means spiritual world. Tripad vibhuti we commonly hear. So 3/4 of Krishna's energy. It is situated beyond this. And then who are situated there, who live there is aprajanam. Praja means one who's born and takes on doing birth after birth after birth. So here apraja means those who never have rebirth. They are situated ashrama, that is their place. They are situated there. Now here within this Trilokya is the 3 worlds with 3, ruled by 3 modes of material nature. Within this Trilokya live aparo, the others, who are grihamedis, attached householders, and abrihadvrataha, who are not strictly following vows of celibacy. Very strong words, very strong verse. Shastra is very straightforward in many areas, which helps only to awaken the sleeping souls, basically. So there's no when Shastra speaks something strong, it is for awakening, and it's not for any other purpose. So here, Prabhupada focuses on one thing throughout the purport. So we will read now. Prabhupada's first sentences are highlights as usual. He says, the climax of the system of Varnashrama Dharma or Sanatan Dharma is clearly expressed here in this particular verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. So what is the climax? Means the end, right? So what is the climax of the system of Varnashram Dharma or Sanatan Dharma? Basically, when one follows Sanatan Dharma within the Varnashrama system, that is Varnashram Dharma, right? So what is the climax of that? The climax is spiritual world, Tripad Vibhuti, entering into Tripad Vibhuti. So now the next sentence, the highest benefit that can be awarded to a human being is to train him to be detached from sex life, particularly because it is only due to sex indulgence that the conditioned life of material existence continues birth after birth. Human civilization in which there is no control of sex life is a fourth-class civilization, because in such an atmosphere, there is no liberation of the soul encaged in the material body. Birth, death, old age, and disease are related to the material body, and they have nothing to do with the spirit soul. But as long as the bodily attachment for sensual enjoyment is encouraged, the individual spirit soul is forced to continue the repetition of birth and death on account of the material body, which is compared to garments subjected to the law of deterioration. So Prabhupada is speaking about how attachment to sensual enjoyment, we keep hearing that, which is at its peak in sex life, right? So we keep hearing this in many of important messages. That one of the important messages that Prabhupada gives is not to get attached to the sensual enjoyment. So why? Because this whole thing of having sensual enjoyment is centered on bodily pleasure. So when this bodily pleasure is given overemphasis in one's life repeatedly and on everyday basis, then naturally one's absorption is in that bodily absorption, in that bodily enjoyment. When one's mind is completely absorbed here, or mostly absorbed here in this aspect of being a conditioned soul, what happens is one is unable to place the mind on something higher. The mind and intelligence run after just satisfying the sensual desire, that one is not able to even think of something beyond the body. So then Prabhupada concludes his purport by saying, by doing this, what happens? The individual spirit soul is forced to continue the repetition of birth and death on account of the material body, which is compared to garments subjected to law of deterioration. So body is going to deteriorate and one is going to keep taking another body because the absorption is in the body. So now the second paragraph we'll read. In order to award the highest benefit of human life, the Varnashram system trains the follower to adopt the vow of celibacy, beginning from the order of brahmachari. The brahmachari life is for students who are educated to follow strictly the vow of celibacy. Youngsters who have had no taste of sex life can easily follow the vow of celibacy. And once fixed in the principle of such a life, one can very easily continue to the highest perfectional stage, attaining the kingdom of the 3/4 energy of the Lord. It's clearly explained that in the cosmos of 3/4 energy of the Lord, there is neither death nor fear. This is from the previous verse, deathlessness and fearlessness. And one is full of blissful life of happiness. This is also from the previous verse, and knowledge. So, so the next part of the purport. A householder attached to family life can easily give up such a life of sex indulgence if he has been trained in the principles of a life of a brahmachari. A householder is recommended to quit home at the age of, sorry, I got distracted by a little squirrel here. A householder is recommended to quit home at the end of 50 years. Pancha Shodvam Vanam Vrajat, and live a life in the forest. Then, being fully detached from family affection, he may accept the order of renunciation as a sannyasi, fully engaged in the service of the Lord. Any form of religious principles in which the followers are trained to pursue the vow of celibacy is good for the human being, because only those who are trained in that way can end the miserable life of material existence. The principles of nirvana, as recommended by Lord Buddha, are also meant for ending the miserable life of material existence. And this process, in the highest degree, is recommended here in Srimad Bhagavatam with clear perception of ideal perfection, although basically there's no difference between the process of Buddhists, Shankarites, and Vaishnavites. For promotion to the highest status of perfection, namely freedom from birth and death, anxiety and fearfulness, not one of these processes allows the follower to break the vow of celibacy. Well, we read a long purport, and there are multiple components of this purport that we may have to pay attention to. The first component of this purport is what is Varnashram system, or why is Varnashram system, mainly the ashram side of it, not the, this purport is not about Varna side of it. We are more of ashram side. Ashram side is brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasi. That is the ashram side of it. So what is this? Why does it have so much importance? It's all about training. The ashram side of the Varnashram is all about training. So no matter which Varna one belongs to, but the ashram is very important too. So what is the training? The training of being detached from bodily enjoyment or sensual enjoyment, which is by following celibacy in the beginning as a brahmachari. This applies both to women and men. So it's not just brahmachari means just men get trained to be essentially detached and women are attached. It's not like that. Both men and women were trained to be focused on higher principles and not about their own sensual pleasure, basically. So the brahmachari life was given when one was a student, from school age, until one chooses the next ashram. So when one is so trained from the beginning, what is the life's goal and how much to invest in maintaining this body, and how to be foreseeing what is beyond the bodily pleasure and how to get there. So this training was given when one was unmarried for both men and women. So when this training was given, then when they take up grihastha ashram, then there is no attachment to that particular sense enjoyment. That particular form of sense enjoyment, the sexual pleasure, or not exactly pleasure in grihastha's life, it is for service. And sexual, that particular, component of grihastha life was used for service. There was no other reason for it. So when one is detached like that, or when at least one is progressively detaching oneself, right? One may not be completely detached when one enters into grihastha life. When one progressively is focused on the higher principles, naturally the lower modes of nature follow. The goal is already preserved in even in grihastha life when one is trained. So, and then the natural, process followed, that when one attained 50 years, when one reached 50 years of age, one started thinking of focusing exclusively on the higher principles of life. So the focus is higher principles of life and spiritual culture. That is the focus, not just, giving up some sensual enjoyment alone. That is part of, focusing on the higher principles, right? So in brahmachari ashram, the focus is maintained. Grihastha ashram, focus is maintained. And then in Vanaprastha life, one exclusively gives up everything, even externally, to focus on the higher principles fully. And then sannyas life, of course. So now Prabhupada goes to the next component of this purport. Very, very interestingly, Prabhupada says there's no difference in this aspect between the processes of Buddhists, Shankarites and Vaishnavites. Basically, he's saying voidists, impersonalists and personalists, that is Vaishnavas. There is no difference, Prabhupada says. What is the no difference part? It's not that yatomat tatopat, all paths lead to same destination. That's not the point here. The point is the practice of celibacy was common between all three, right? Is common between all, I mean, at least supposed to be common between all three, depending on, in other parts, in voidistic philosophy and Shankarite philosophy. It depends on who is teaching at this current point, whether it is the original principles are preserved or not. Mainly sensual pleasure was not advocated. It was discouraged by Lord Buddha, as we know, desirelessness, and by Shankara also, and by Vaishnavites. But Prabhupada very much clearly establishes here that in the highest degree, this is recommended in Bhagavatam, which means the highest degree of perfection, even in giving up celibacy, even in giving up attachment to sensual pleasure and following celibacy, the highest degree of it is recommended in Bhagavatam or Vaishnava philosophy. Why? Because there is positive engagement. There is eternal cultivation of eternal constitutional position, and for the sake of that, giving up the lower modes, basically. So this is the highest degree of perfection when one follows Krishna's system directly. So then Prabhupada goes on to the third paragraph. That's the last paragraph of this purport. Let's read. The householders and persons who have deliberately broken the vow of celibacy cannot enter into the kingdom of deathlessness. The pious householders or the fallen yogis or the fallen transcendentalists can be promoted to the higher planets within the material world. 1/4 of energy of the Lord. But they will fail to enter into the kingdom of deathlessness. Okay, so Prabhupada is saying that being a householder is not a problem. It's not at all a problem. It's actually one of the 4 ashramas in Varnashrama system. And in following Daivi Varnashram or Varnashrama focused on pleasing Hari, pleasing Lord Krishna, Haritoshanam, it's going to be, it is a devotional life of grihasthas, So devotion is needed, not just material piety. So when these principles are followed, even including the celibacy principle or any other principle, without Krishna, that is just material piety. And where does such people end up in? They still remain in this material world, but in the higher planets of this material world. They're not really they're not transcending. So the piety is not enough. Following a principle independent of just cultivating Krishna consciousness is not going to cut it, basically. So now next sentence. Abrahad vratas are those who have broken the vow of celibacy. Okay, so that's just a definition of abrahad vratas. Who are abrahad vratas? Now the next sentence, the vanaprasthas are those retired from family life, and sannyasis or renounced persons cannot break the vow of celibacy if they want success in the process. So one has to choose these ashrams very carefully. So that's important, because just immature renunciation, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 3rd chapter, is not welcome. It's not going to get anybody anywhere. Immature renunciation is like, what does Krishna say? Mityachara sa uchyate. He says in 3rd chapter, Mithya achara is just a show bottle show bottle celibacy, basically. So it doesn't help. So this is like a point to consider when one chooses the ashram. And next sentence, the brahmacharis, vanaprasthas and sannyasis do not intend to take birth, apraja, nor are they meant for it secretly indulging in sex life. Such a fall down by the spiritualist may be compensated by another chance for human life in good families of learned brahmanas or rich merchants of another term of elevation. But the best thing is to attain the highest perfection of deathlessness as soon as human form of life is attained. So Prabhupada is saying, don't wait for another lifetime, please. We don't want to just think that, devotional service, it's a long process. Sometimes we even casually mention that I may not make it this lifetime, Prabhu. I have to see. I mean, if it is, it's out. We think sometimes out of humility one speaks like that. It's nice. Definitely, some devotees speak extremely out of their profound humility that I'm not eligible to go back to Godhead. But that doesn't mean they have given up the desire. But sometimes one may say that I'm not qualified. It should not be like we give up the desire as well. Humility means holding the desire, but yet feel not there yet. Holding the desire very strongly and expecting mercy, at the same time feeling not qualified. That part. So Prabhupada is mentioning here that please, don't wait for another lifetime, he says, right? As soon as human form of life is attained, but the best thing is to attain the highest perfection of deathlessness as soon as the human form of life is attained. So just in this one life, get it over with. So now Prabhupada says, otherwise the whole policy of human life will prove to be a total failure. Lord Chaitanya was very strict in advising his followers in this matter of celibacy. One of his personal attendants, Chota Haridas, was severely punished by Lord Chaitanya because of his failure to observe the vow of celibacy. For a transcendentalist, therefore, who at all wants to be promoted to the kingdom beyond material miseries, it is worse than suicide to deliberately indulge in sex life, especially in the renounced order of life. Sex life in the renounced order of life is the most perverted form of religious life, and such a misguided person can only be saved if, by chance, he meets a pure devotee. So that's the end of the purport. So in this whole verse, I'll go back to the verse again. Padastrayo bahi shasan aprajanam ya ashrama. Padastrayo in the Tripad Vibhuti, Tripad manifestation of Krishna's energy, that is the spiritual world, 3/4 of Lord's energy, which is beyond this realm of material world. Who lives there? Aprajanam, those who are not meant for rebirth. And the next part of the shloka, or verse, Antas Trilokyas Tvaparo. Within this 3 lokyas, 3 portions of material world, who lives aparo, others, who are grihamedo abrahad brataha, who are attached householders, who have given up the following the vow of celibacy, who are not following the vow of celibacy. So then the translation is, the spiritual world, which consists of 3/4 of the Lord's energy, is situated beyond this material world, and it is especially meant for those who will never be reborn. Others who are attached to family life and who do not strictly follow celibacy vows must live within this 3 modes of 3 material worlds. Just in short summary, in the purport, Prabhupada covers what is the goal of Varnashram Dharma or Sanatana Dharma. He equates both. Varnashram Dharma is equal to Sanatana Dharma when one follows it with Krishna in the center, right? So he says that the highest benefit is going back to Tripad Vibhuti, spiritual world. And now it is not possible without giving up attachment to sex life, because sex life means rebirth and rebirth and rebirth. because the sensual pleasure that is in this particular aspect of conditioned life is extremely severely focused on bodily pleasure. That's what I should put it as, severely focused on bodily pleasure. So then there is naturally absorption in bodily pleasure, and not in spiritual culture or cultivating one's constitutional position or awakening one's spiritual position. So when the focus is not there, obviously one is not going to get it. So now in the next part of the purport, Prabhupada speaks about how training is important, from brahmachari training before marriage, or before or when the person is in the school age. From then on, brahmachari life is recommended. Vow of celibacy is the very important part of brahmachari training. And when the training is there, then one moves on to next ashrams, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasi, with the focus maintained on spiritual culture. When one is not trained, then one just continues the focus maintained on bodily pleasure. Then the last purport Prabhupada says, material piety is not sufficient. Pious householders do not end up in spiritual world. Pious householders just end up in the higher planets in this material world. But deathlessness is given or attained by householders who are focused on Krishna consciousness, cultivating Krishna consciousness actively, progressing in their vow of celibacy. Right? And then Prabhupada completes by saying that when there is a pure devotee in one's life, even one is not so qualified and not have really perfected giving up the sensual enjoyment and not able to keep up the vow of celibacy still, but still at least take shelter of a pure devotee and get guided. When one gets guided by a pure devotee, then one can keep moving forward in awakening one's real position, spiritual position. So that is the verse 2620. If anyone has any thoughts, discussions, this is the time.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
It is such a significant point with regard to this particular point, the aspect that Prabhupada is emphasizing, as well as he mentioned in the purport, that it is a Buddhist or whether it is a impersonalist or whoever it may be. This, when we hear about the emphasis on celibacy in the practice of any path, particularly for those of us who are trained to follow this path of the personal concept of God, and which is the highest, and the emphasis on this celibacy, so many times it is when you hear about it, generally people may think that, okay, just one of the principles, but this Ekapad Vibhuti and Tripad Vibhuti discussion context, and in that context, when it is clearly explained that the Lord's creation, it's only 1/3 here and 3/4 is somewhere else, with so many living entities who are attained perfectional stage, and so much description about the context. When this is being discussed, the pitfall of, what is the real factor that really makes one land in this Ekapad Vibhuti, instead of like 3/4 of Lord's creation is up there? And how is it that this 1/3 end up in this material energy of the Lord. And this one single point about strict following of celibacy, so it really makes you think that it's not like just something somebody is imposing upon you. It's like a key, it's a key to entering into the spiritual realm.
Yes.
And I don't think it registers that easily, because especially people born in this world, and the brahmacharya training and all those things are not strictly emphasized in our ordinary day-to-day life. Even if one is coming from pious families, and even people who are brought up that way, what to speak about those who are not brought up that way. Even in pious families, there is not even like a tiny little space where this is being instructed. And
Yes.
and to instruct this also, unless there is a spiritual training and inclination and a clear understanding, a very crystal clear understanding, how does this one factor leads to the degradation of mental and bodily, of course it attaches one to the bodily consciousness of life and deep attachment. It's not even I read it in some other purport that it is not even a sensual stimulation. That is not the problem with this uh, um, uh, what is it called, the attachment to sex life. It is not even sensual stimulation. Ultimately the mental, as well as the mental aspect of it, plus it ultimately gives one the kind of body also. The mental makeup changes, the bodily aspect changes, and falls down. And so the thing is, and this again, this is everything revolves around sex life in human form of life. And of course, it's not, we are particularly focused on the human form of life that we are given, and everything is revolving around this particular energy. And anybody who has even a slight inclination of spiritual life has to understand this problem. The problem, the key to entering into the spiritual realm. And so of course, ordinarily nobody is getting any training, and even after you get training, it is not like a mechanical process either. The more you deeply understand, genuinely you really understand that this particular problem is the thing that is keeping the living entity in the ekapad vibhuti, and there is no way of um, everything else that we do will not cut it. If this one problem is not understood and appreciated, and consciously one comes to that position of um, consciously one has to choose this, not like mechanically doing it, because I don't think anybody can mechanically overcome this particular problem. Consciously coming to the point of appreciating what this is all about, and really wanting it for the sake of wanting it. It is so in a sense, even though there are so many other aspects of the practice of devotional life, this one point, if it does not register, and of course, even to overcome this particular problem of this material world, one has to be living a life of thoughtfulness. And if one does not make that kind of an effort, I don't think anyone in this material world can overcome So add to the fact that there is no initial training in our personal lives, as well as the emphasis that is given to okay, the more you enjoy, the better for you in this lifetime. That
Yeah.
type of lifestyle, add to that, and in the middle of that, in the in namesake practice of spirituality, no way can take one out of this this ekapad vibhuti.
Yeah.
One will be stuck here for eternity,
Yeah.
and yeah, so this is really the key. To me, it sounded from starting from so many verses before this particular this one single point. This is the thing that is keeping you here, and how much importance one has to give, and how importance in the sense, to me it feels like not artificially trying to do something, but really trying to really understanding it. And when you have a deep understanding, okay, this is a problem, this is the key problem, and therefore there is a change in there has to be a deep change in my approach to everything that I do in my life, so that I can follow the instructions that are coming through Srimad Bhagavatam, and to be able to even think in the direction of my that inner journey. There won't be any journey at all minus this. That is the feeling I was getting reading this Ekapad and Tripad Vibhuti section, and really very interesting point, very key point. Most important point, I feel. Yes. Thank you so much for your systematic presentation of Srila Prabhupada's purport. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, Mataji, for sharing the importance of this principle, and how not to just do it artificially, but understand the deeper aspect of it. Actually, when we understand the deeper aspect of it, it becomes kind of natural to not be attached to this, actually. But it takes a like serious inner contemplation and progression, basically. Yeah. Thank you, Mataji.
Yeah, the contemplation part is, if that is missing, I don't think anyone can even if the contemplation is missing, it is impossible.
Yeah, then things become very mechanical, and one loses the taste of everything without introspection, right? Like, yeah, I've heard this from you repeatedly about importance of introspection. Yeah, contemplation. Sorry, I cut you off, Mataji.
No, that's fine. I was when I was reading this whole section, it really stood out, and it reminded me so much of the how you read in various contexts, the sex energy is the driving factor here. You read about so many aspects of it in various sections in Srimad Bhagavatam and all that, but then when you look at it in a very detached way, objectively looking the lifestyle of people, even those of us who are in this path, coming probably maybe majority coming from some pious backgrounds and families, and to what degree that kind of training is given.
Yes, absolutely.
To who, even to the next generation, how it is being taught. Sometimes it is taught in a very rigid way, and that rigid approach of teaching also may not stick. It
doesn't work, because it is again the Bhagavad Gita verse only comes to my mind when you say this Vishaya Vinivatante. If there is no Param Drishtwani, but there is no higher taste, then these things just rigidly following does not really do a favor, because it comes back at full force after some time.
The higher taste aspect has to be there, but even then the higher taste aspect, the to develop even the higher taste, when with the understanding that this one sticky point, this one single thing, it is the real stumbling block in the path of spiritual progress. No matter else, whatever else that one does, it does not make you, it does not have the ability to move one too much if one is lacking in this one key aspect. So how to educate that without being like without telling or without presenting this subject as a, it's like a abstinence, rather than, it's not about that. It is more, how does this impact one's consciousness? How does it affect one's mental makeup, as well as that leads to the kind of physical coverings that we receive in course of the transmigration from one lifetime to another. And it is a very important and interesting subject matter. And I don't know how much of this is being really transmitted, because you read about it, you may think that it is okay, one aspect of spiritual life one has to do, but this is the key. If it is missing, it is a journey, but you are not going anywhere.
Yeah. Thank you, Mathaji. Any other thoughts, devotees? Okay, all right. So we'll end here. So we just did 2-6-20 today. Okay, 21 tomorrow, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for joining. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah.
Thank you, Mathaji.